Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you three major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This weekend, we're bringing you each of these stories separately so you can listen over a shorter, discrete period of time. Hope you enjoy them.
For the last 5 years, SLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations. Novo Nordisk. The SurfingMASH podcast platform and series are proudly sponsored by Novo Nordisk, a global healthcare company driving change to defeat serious chronic diseases. Novo Nordisk has no impact on the content or information provided within this podcast episode.
Regeneron is a leading biotechnology company that invents, develops, and commercializes life-transforming medicines for serious diseases. Founded and led by physician scientists, their unique ability to repeatedly translate science into medicine has led to numerous approved treatments and product candidates in development, most of which were homegrown in their laboratories. They are shaping the next frontier of medicine with data-powered insights from the Regeneron Genetics Center and pioneering genetic medicine platforms, enabling them to identify innovative targets and complementary approaches to potentially treat diseases like obesity and MASH.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. LiverRight is America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight. That's liver then R-I-G-H-T as if one word, at www.liverright.com.
Tawazun Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazun Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers, now in over 30 countries around the globe. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about Tawazun Health or our sister lifestyle app, MyLife365.me, click the Tawazun Health link on the SurfingMASH homepage. In this conversation, held shortly after the roundtable ended, Louise Campbell and Roger Green discuss why they found this roundtable so powerful. Looking at the larger world today while recalling comments and conversations from earlier episodes, they place the Harrison Fellowship advocates in the broader context of the last 5 years' growth of patient advocacy for SLD, and how this roundtable testifies to advocacy's growing power.
So, Louise, that was quite a remarkable discussion. I believe it's the first time we've ever had patient advocates on alone at a moment when they felt empowered. We had done it before in moments like after drugs got shot down or the FDA said something that they thought was troubling, but we've never had an empowered group of patient advocates on before. And frankly, I don't know that we've ever had a global group on before.
No, I agree with you.
What struck you?
Just the passion. And everybody says one of my selling points is the passion because they feel it. I've never been a patient, but you can see in their words, you could hear in the tone of the voice, just the passion and how much it meant to them. But also, for me, how much advocacy gives to patients. We talk a lot about advocates, either myself or patients or yourself. Stephen was obviously absolute passionate advocate for allied health and also patients, which this is such a fitting award. But that to me is the key. Advocacy gives patients strength to fight their own condition. And we had a wealth of different condition backgrounds. The background from HIV is extremely important because they are one of the biggest empowered group of patient advocates around the world. And I think hepatology can learn an awful lot from that. And we've got empowered patient advocates. But oh my God, they were just amazing, which is obviously why we're doing a post discussion of how excited we were about what was discussed there. So what was your take? You always ask the question, what was your take?
I know that we have some of our guests in our ears. Guests who weren't on the podcast, things that were said before. I know the one we both caught on to, which I'm going to let you talk about because you suggested we do this in parts so you could bring that one up. But here's another one. Every time I get any kind of description wrong. So-and-so is it this patient or that patient? Mike Patel calls and in a very friendly way chides me and says, what's the nomenclature? Okay. I think what this is about, as much as anything else, is why a MASH patient is not a realistic construct for a person living with MASH. And it was the thing I was talking about actually on the podcast. A MASH patient, if that's all you are, and you find out that the drug failed, well, then that was a failure. If you're a person living with MASH and you understand the totality of what we're trying to do here, maybe it didn't succeed for you, but the knowledge that was gained will help the next person, and you might actually be the next person. And you go on with a life that has aspirations and purpose in it, and all this just fuels that. So I thought if anybody who listens to this podcast wonders exactly how advocacy is core to a sense of identity, as compared to a disease being core to a sense of identity, this was just brilliant.
Yeah, and I think they brought up lots of points that get repeated. I get the sense that we in healthcare or we in industry sometimes say it's just one person, but these are people who didn't know each other before, potentially, but they echo things that Donna has said. And the one that obviously we both smiled at, I think it might have been Pam, was it, who brought it up?
Pam.
In the context of a cardiologist, not knowing about and understanding MASH. And she's stage 4, which is cirrhosis, and then finding out a little bit more. And the whole comment about I could have a heart attack and die did remind me of the episode that was very entertaining with Donna Cryer and Vlad.
Vlad, that's you, yeah.
Talking about that. And Donna said, ultimately, I'm the patient. I don't care what kills me. I'll be dead. So communicate. That whole essence of we're not siloed. The patient, the body is not siloed. We might go. So this advocacy for me is about putting the dots together. And I had a thought, probably rather of Stevenism during this when I was listening to our body's like the Rubik's Cube. When it's all together, we've got all of our sides on the right colours. Because my niece was playing the Rubik's Cube the other day. But we can have 2 layers in the right place. We can have most of the sections in the right place. But if we're not all together, we're not getting the best result. And you fail. Her comments, particularly on that, did remind me of things we hear repeatedly. I think they also all shared the same area, which I commented on, about people still saying it's just a bit of fat or without quantifying it. We now have devices, whether it's MRE, whether it's MRI, PDFS, we can be more specific. We need to change our language to go with what diagnostic tools we're doing, not just focus on a stiffness level, which is liver disease, but we've now got steatotic liver, whether it's MET-ALD, whether it's any one of the other 6 classifications. We need to be having better discussions. And when we do our EASL sessions, we talk about the language you use. We never talk about fibrosis. We talk about stiffness, for example. So it's equative across the other measurement machines. So a lot of consistent themes come up, which means we don't have enough information going into healthcare. And advocacy programs like this are vital because you know that I have advocated a long time for, we're teaching doctors about resmetirom. We're going to now be teaching them about semaglutide for fatty liver and MASH and muzzled, but we're teaching doctors. We're getting stronger and stronger advocates, and they described it as getting an army. And that's what we need to drive that. But we are not educating allied health professionals, nurses, physios, dietetics, all of the other allied health that come in. Because I see a lot of people who are type 2 diabetic, or they drop their exercise, they get injuries, they put on weight because they haven't stopped, and nobody talks about the other parts because nobody's having that conversation. It's just not there. So it's an important part of advocacy, and they're going to drive that, and I think that's really important for me.
So I had dinner the other week with some folks I know who, it turns out, one is taking tirzepatide or semi, I don't know which, and the other one just finished the course of it. The husband doesn't exercise much. The wife does. And one of the people who knows about this stuff was afterwards made the observation that when they see people taking a GLP-1 and not worrying about wasting, it's more likely men than women. And for what it's worth, both these people are somewhere near this industry. There's more to it even than just, do you understand the liver matters? It's when you're treating the liver, as the same sense as in Pam's case in reverse. Not just when you're treating the heart, you understand the liver matters, but when you're treating the liver, you understand what else matters. And I think wasting and loss of muscle mass is going to become a huge issue as this goes on, because we'll have the ability to conquer what's worse than the disease, but then we've got to make sure that people don't go flying off in different directions.
And I think the other thing is listening to patient advocates like that is a fitting tribute to Steve. He was a powerhouse and his mind was open to listening to patients often. And I think Wayne described it as sometimes it feels like it's just a tick box to have a patient in the room. When we're in the industry, we forget that we could be patients and we're going to learn from these people. And we're going to remember if we ever become a patient with that condition, I should have listened a bit more. So you can listen without listening. When we go into a scientific mindset, you know it, I have great conversations on here and go, it's not about always the figures, the numbers and the things like that. It's also about moving and making movements happen. And that's what's happening in the memory of Stephen.
You know, it's a funny thing. We're 5 or 6 episodes into this thing years and years ago, about the time that we invited you to come on permanently. I asked Stephen, so who do we need to have that we don't have? And he said, you really have to have Donna Cryer. Someone has to speak for the patient. That was back at episode 6, episode 9. And he said, that's one thing that's not in our sauce right now. So I think you couldn't be more correct. This was here in the first place because Stephen said you can't do what we're trying to do without bringing the patient to the party. And we've done so ever since.
And I think Mel made the comment that she didn't want anybody else to be her. That is such an important message because I see lots of people who are never, ever going to be seen by a hepatologist, who do need to be seen by cardiologists and endocrinologists, but they get that opportunity to listen, to talk, to find out something that can prevent a member of their family becoming them. And I have just seen somebody whose father was diagnosed with primary liver cancer at a level that was untreatable, and we may just have taken that person off that timeline, but just because they were aware enough to come in. And I think that's advocacy. That when you drive your family, when you do things like that, it's the most powerful advocacy.
So it's funny. I heard her comment from 2 directions. And the other one is when she said, I don't want anyone to be me. Now, going back to the beginning, we're not just our disease. So in fact, while she says, I don't want anybody to be me, and I wasn't going to go into this on podcast, I was hoping what she really meant was, I don't want anyone to live with what I live with. Very different statements. I wish everybody in a similar situation would be her, ideally earlier, so they don't have to live with it. The other thing that struck me is we've not seen a lot of patient advocates come on this podcast who talk openly about HE, because HE is a whole different game. You know, the idea that you fog out for a period of time and stretch. I think 2 or 3 of these folks talked about HE. Pam did, Melanie did. I know Steve talked with me about HE, but I don't remember if it was here or when we were talking in Paris. I don't remember if that came up on the podcast. But I think the more doctors, patients, everybody appreciate that we're not just talking about saving lives, but we're talking about saving quality of lives in meaningful ways, HE being one of those. It changes the discussion again. In my first marriage, both of my ex-wife's grandmothers were in decline. One Alzheimer's and one her body was failing. And they used to both talk to my in-laws about, well, you know, what's happening with me is horrible, but I couldn't possibly be the other one. When we talk about cancer transplant death, and we say quality of life, like it matters, and it does, but we don't talk about HE, which to me is really one of the pivotal cardinal quality of life issues associated with cirrhosis. If we thought about that more and we educated about that more, doctors who really do live a life of the mind might be more appreciative of exactly what they're not paying attention to. And that's just a thought that had me today as we were doing the podcast.
No, but I think you're right. And I think what was noticeable now, thinking about it because I was so engrossed in what they were saying, is those are postmenopausal women. Postmenopausal women are the biggest transplant referral now. We're not going to get the opportunity to age if we do not look at this properly. So we have strong advocates. Grade 4 cirrhosis, postmenopausal. Our big risk is sitting there now as advocates. And that's the power of this as well. When we think back who was on the panel, for me, obviously, my husband's ex-wife is Bulgarian. So I go to Bulgaria. So I really was taken with Silvana's stuff because I see a lot of Bulgarians. They are not small people on the whole. I watch their diet. I think, obviously, I go a lot and they can have lots of healthy food, but they also have not. It's portion size and stuff. And Bulgaria is one of the largest and rapidly largest growing populations by size in Europe now. Yeah. So there were lots of little connections there that I felt strongly with because obviously the Bulgarian system is slightly different. They do have higher rates of viral hepatitis, but it is using people as strong as she is and to get her goal that she will be having a conversation with the parliament and government in 2 or 3 years' time. I'm happy to rock up and do fibre scans for her because we know that sort of political move works. It worked in the UK. The British Liver Trust do scan in Parliament, and they've achieved some great stuff. We've tested with them for hepatitis C, things like that. So when we empower politicians, and I think that's a really stand out, and I'm sure Milan will help her and all of the Alpha Team and Liver Patients International and things like that. So the strength is also the bonding for me of lots of patient organizations, because sometimes in certain areas, mental health, you can see it, some of them pull in different directions. But I genuinely feel across the Liver Network, most times, everybody will have different agendas, but we're all pushing for the same thing, to develop a program in Stephen's name that he would just be, I can hear him now, raving about. If he hadn't thought it, he'd be saying, why didn't I think of that? Keep it simple. Let's just do it. You can just hear his voice saying it. And I think that's the power, but they are powerful people. And each one of them's going to empower people around. So, and it's so good to hear about Wayne's. Okay.
Yeah, the way Wayne doing as well as he is. I'll tell you, Savannah hit me from one other direction as well, which is her groundbreaker. We've done, close to 300 of these now? We've never heard that groundbreaker. I was in a taxi and rock music and dancing around and laughing with the cab driver, and all of a sudden I didn't feel so bad about my situation. Hep B has all kinds of issues around it, right? Intimacy issues, living with something you can't cure. I believe you can't cure issues. Better now, but still not. And for her to just be able to feel that lightness that allowed her to soar in that moment. And then on the other side, you do hepatic encephalopathy, and you go, well, okay, that's pretty much the range of human condition, right? Or the human mental condition. When you talk to Steve alone, which I did at some length in Paris, he is tremendously impressed by the impact he can have by living his life and telling his story that way. And I think it came as a complete shock to him at first. I think now he's starting to wear his way into it. But, the couple of years back, he could simply have been an alcoholic hiding it from everybody. And by stepping into what he had to step into, he's gone so much further than I think he ever would have thought he could.
Absolutely. And he did share a story about the first time he stood up at a microphone at a conference and making a difference. And it empowered him so much. And it is so touching. And when people see that the way they communicate and the power of their words can make a difference to somebody's life is really lovely to watch. And that's why at the beginning of this, it's that passion that you see in them. We don't always get it right. We're not going to get it right for 100% of people, but hopefully we help. And hopefully they're making a difference. And I think going back to your point on, it's not one person has MASH alone. It is a family condition. It affects your quality of life. It affects who comes to appointments with you, particularly if you're encephalopathic, making sure that somebody is there just in case, just to explain things and help you. And because people who are around you need to understand encephalopathy. And I think the key is they are your first responders if you start to become encephalopathic, because that pathway can be very, very rapid. I always remember a lady who went home with it for a weekend. She was going home for a weekend leave. The doctors had seen her. They sent her home. She came back 4 hours later in a grade 4 encephalopathic coma. She had sepsis in her toe, and it got picked up very quickly. So she just went off very, very quickly. We solved the problem, but it is that quick. So people knowing that, and that advocacy story and making sure people know is really, really important. It's just not just more than MASH or MASLs, it's what comes with it and how we support, which is why it is so nice to hear. It is sad to see that we need it in any disease area, but I do think they will get an army. And I think that army will be powerful because this is a global problem. And if we can get those advocates in countries, and particularly lower and middle income countries, who are more going to be empowered by what advocates can do to change diet, lifestyle, and meaning without medication, because they're not going to have that access potentially. And that's where this power really, really can move mountains. And I think I can't think of a better tribute for Stephen, or even partly being involved in it from Surfing the MASH, so that he could discuss that and do all of those things, because he was always proud of his family and his kids. That whole thing is you don't want your family to get into that by sharing your stories. So yeah, it's the type of episode that makes me feel very humble.
I completely agree. I intend within the next couple of days to reach out to Wayne and ask if people are capable of donating to the foundation. Because ultimately, or the fellowship, how many fellows they can take may not be as simple as how many will Madrigal fund. And Madrigal funded this round. But who else is going to fund as well? And this is an effort that should just deserves to do brilliantly.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're only going to get stronger together. That is the key.
One more sign the momentum's going in the right direction. Completely agree.
On behalf of the surfers, our guests and our sponsors, Novo Nordisk, Regeneron, Liver Right, and Tawazun Health, thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week for a series of roundtables and interviews covering major recent issues in the world of steatotic liver disease.
And until next week, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you again on SurfingMASH Tsunami Podcast. Bye-bye now.